I think that excellence can and does exist at every level, and it shouldn't matter whether you're flipping, foie gras or burgers, really. I think to cook well, Anthony Huckstep, you've got to want to cook well.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. On Tuesday, Queensland finally opened its borders. With international travel still in doubt and the sun shining, people are eager to travel Australia and enjoy the hospitality of our great country. After the devastation of bushfires, followed by a pandemic, what sort of summer shall we expect down under? Alastair McCleod is the chef and owner of Al'FreshCo Catering in sunny Queensland. Alastair, how are you going?
The mellifluous tones of Anthony Huckstep. Nice to talk to you, sir. I am very well.
Well, it's great to have you here. The borders have just opened. It's nice and warm up there today. How are you feeling about that?
I think with a bit of sort of caution, I think it's a very good thing. The borders were closed for a very long time up here. We've been very conservative in our handling of this. I'm sure some schools of thought would say that's served us well. But there's a lot of people here very happy.
What sort of impact has the borders being closed had on Queensland businesses?
I suppose it depends which market you are in. I mean, I was up doing a cooking thing in a place called Yeppoon, just sort of out to the coast from Rockhampton. And I was asking a couple of restaurateurs there how they were going, and they were saying, do you know what, Alastair, it's been like Christmas for the last 8 months. Maybe not the last 8 months, but certainly since, we opened up again, people have been, really exploring their own backyard, and they have been as full as a doctor's wallet, full as a state school hat rack, the hotels, the restaurants, the cafes. And they were going, they felt a bit guilty saying it almost, but they were going, this has been very good. But then if you're a restaurant in the CBD, I don't know, you've talked to many of the chefs. I heard you talking to Jake Nicholson a wee while ago. And, it's a real struggle. They've had to really be innovative and dynamic with their offering to keep revenue flowing.
You do many things across food. What sort of impact has this year had on what you do?
I mean, we have a catering business. That's my main hat, Anthony Huckstep. And, initially, mid sort of May, it was a wipeout, absolute wipeout. Everyone was just jettisoning the diary. I mean, what do they say? If you're looking for sympathy, you'll find it in the dictionary between shit and syphilis. But it was really grim. I mean, it was really, really confronting. I was away for a couple of days up north, and it's my wife and I who run the business, Ashley, and she said, "Oh my goodness, I have been fielding calls all day," and I said, "Well, that's pretty normal," but it was people just getting out. Corporate bookings, the diary just went to zero. A big part of our business would be weddings, making people happy with your craft. Very, very satisfying from a job point of view. To be fair, none of them cancelled, Anthony. They all postponed, and we can see them if we stand on our tippy toes. I'm only 5'6.5", but if we stand on our tippy toes, we can still see them in the diary. They don't get married in summer, but they do get married in spring, and they do get married next autumn, and so we can hang in there, but be pretty confronting.
What sort of things do you do in the initial stages to sort of keep money coming in the door?
Initially, we drank booze, and we live in the pretend countryside. We live 35-40 minutes from the Brisbane CBD, and we just came up for air for a second, Anthony. We with a small business like this, we're cooks and phone call fielders and light bulb changers and toilet, it's the whole gamut. And so we just came up for air for a second, and then, and that whole idea, you rest, you rust. You just, and I said to Ashley, I need to cook. Not with any great nobleness. It's the I don't have a hobbies, Anthony Huckstep, to speak of. And I was cooking a lot at home, and Ashley, like we were around each other. Like, can you stop cooking so much? And I said, well, we need to eat. And I was making dumplings and wrappers, pastry wrappers from scratch. And she said, could you just stop? I was giving her the Edgar Brits just by cooking. And then, so because we live in a community, everyone lives in a community, but we live in a valley of 12,000 people. And obviously people can come in and can leave that valley. But there's a real sense of that sense of fraternity, of collegiateness. And so we identified, and we use through the business, Anthony, probably 20 different suppliers, farmers, fishers, growers, producers, distillers, brewers, the whole catastrophe from around this area. And we thought, well, surely they must be experiencing diminished demand as well. And so we decided to create some meals using, which was our normal golf swing anyway, using perhaps a surplus demand that they would have had, and create dishes that we could then deliver to just our postcode. And our postcode could be, 45 minutes from one end to the other. And so we did that. And we have a place in our community through local dinners that we do. And we just thought, it really wasn't about remuneration. I mean, really, and if you can cross a pale across all of the Deep in the Weeds podcast, is none of these guys and girls are doing it for remuneration. If you want money, you should rob a bank. It's a job that's driven by zeal, by fervor, by a passion for making people happy. And so we decided to do that, and it went bonkers. It went absolutely bonkers. And so our chef Steve, who has worked for me, Anthony Huckstep, for 18 years, who we had laid off, we brought him back, and we cooked. And in our commercial kitchen, Anthony, we have not like other kitchens. There's no, the heat of the kitchen isn't just temperature. Kitchens are sweaty, bloody, bastardly places, and that's just the good ones. Our kitchen has a coffee machine. Our kitchen has a television, so we can watch the chase in the afternoon, and we can learn what the capital of Azerbaijan is, and so on. And so, a preparation kitchen for a catering business, our catering business anyway, has a different rhythm. There's no zing, 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 zing of the docket machine ringing in our ears. And so we got in the kitchen and we did what we do, and we cooked, and we learned how to package food, and we learned how to understand the logistics of doing delivery runs, and we continued to make people happy.
How important was that for you during that time?
Oh, it was really, really cathartic. It felt, cooking is the job that you don't need to wait for. My wife will disagree with me. The monthly figures or the weekly figures or the quarterly report to know whether you've done a good job or not. That's not the measure for a cook. The measure is people saying, Alastair, that was amazing. That tasted great. And you immediately know your place in the universe. That is the reason for cooking. I mean, sure, you got to know the back end stuff and you got to have that to propel you forward. But that felt very nice, Anthony. It felt nice to be symbolically out of the house and going to people's doors. I mean, that's what really, if I can just digress for a second, that's what differs, I believe, catering, or the way we do it, to restaurants, perhaps. You're in people's homes. You're not at the coalface. You are at the coalface, but you're right there receiving the feedback straight away. You're doing the, after they've bought their house and their car, their wedding's probably the most thing they've ever spent their money on in their life, and so it's it's a really euphoric day, and it's a lovely thing to be a part of, to make people happy like that, and so to then do it on this small scale with $22 meals, and seeing people, some were doing it as a treat, and we told them, hey, stick it on your nice plates. Don't be sitting in front of the television. Get a nice get a nice tumbler of that Pinot Noir or Fiano or whatever the kids are drinking, and sit at the table and talk and share and break bread and do all that sort of stuff. And so they were part of their cooking instructions, their reheating instructions, where this is how we want you to enjoy this food. It's produce from the valley you live in, prepared by people who live in this valley for you. This lovely sort of idea of a loop. And so some people were doing it for a treat. Some people, well, to this day, Anthony Huckstep, we are feeding them, and they have decided that they're over it, and we are feeding them 7 nights a week, and it's a beautiful thing, and it makes you understand what cooking, or what the craft of cookery gives you, and what it doesn't give you. It's not about dots and foams and airs and gels and symphonies and cutting things into rhombuses and parallelograms. It can be all of those things, but it's making people happy. But then there's other people who are supporting us for simply that. They are not in a condescending way. They're doing it to support us. They're doing it to actually to. They're part of a community, and they think, well, we're going to spend money with you, Al. We're going to get our hair cut at Scotty Barbarino's in the main street in Samford. We're going to get our car serviced there. We're going to buy our mushrooms from Maddie, our silver beet from Liam, all that sort of stuff. And if you called them tomorrow and said, hey, what did you eat from Alastair last night? They probably couldn't remember, but they would say, but we supported. And that's a broad, holistic sort of sense, a positive message that's come out of this, I think.
There's restaurants, and then there's great restaurants, and the same with caterers. There's caterers and great caterers. What makes a great catered event?
I think if I can preface my answer by saying, no cook, this is my words, not speaking for anyone else, is no cook wants to be the chef of a catering business any more than they want to be the chef of a prison, a hospital, a cruise ship. It's not the vanguard, and I know that. You're not, with flames, and you're cooking that meal for that person right away. There is a different set of sort of sensibilities and processes that have to happen. But if I didn't think we could do the same thing as we were doing in the restaurants, as close as shit is to swearing, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I think that excellence could exist, can and does exist at every level. And it shouldn't matter whether you're flipping, foie gras or burgers, really. I think to cook well, Anthony Huckstep, you've got to want to cook well. And I have actually never enjoyed my cooking so much. I enjoy the control of it. I enjoy the fact that this week we've got 5 jobs on this week. Tomorrow night I'm going to a little medical clinic, and I know exactly how many people I'm going to feed. I know what the dietary requirements are. I know what the owner of the company's favourite wine is. I know what his favourite colour is. I know what he likes to drink, mostly lots. And there's something very... You can really reach people. There's something... there's something very empirical about that. There's something that's good from a commercial point of view about that. Being able to see my 3-year-old girl a little bit more, or I'm convinced I'm seeing her a little bit more. It's a good. We enjoy it we enjoy the business model of it, and I think you can do a really, really good job, and ultimately you're doing the same thing. You're making people happy with your craft.
You mentioned that if you're in the industry, you're in it because of the fervour, because of the passion, because you love what you do. Where did your interest in food start from?
My mother is from here. I can actually, I'm looking down to her house right now, Anthony Huckstep. She lives 100 metres away. My mother was born in the city of Cairns in tropical North Queensland, and her father was born on Arab Island in the eastern Torres Strait, right up in the tippy tip of Australia. I
Wow.
was the name drop alert. I was the Australia Day ambassador for the Torres Strait Islands this January, before everything went pear shaped, and normally the position is taken by a leading person in I don't know, the medical field, in media, some person of real note, maybe in the military, and so I was there handing out the awards, saying I'm a cook. and and as I told the story of my genealogy and sort of joined all those dots together, I mean, the Aborigines, with broad brushstrokes, are a nomadic people, whereas the Torres Strait Islanders, again in broad brushstrokes, are cultivators. They put down roots and they grow stuff. Not much up there. I mean, cassava, coconuts, pawpaws. They're not allowed to run cattle because it's a quarantine zone. And so they put down roots. And so the families that are up in the Torres Straits have been up there for eons. Families like my mother's family, the Guevaras. There are still dozens and dozens of Guevaras up there. The Savages, the Kennedys, the Pitts, who go right back to Pitt the Elder, the Prime Minister of the UK. The Sailors, I am most likely related to Wendell Sailor at some point. The Thaiday, Sammy Thaiday, ex-Bronco, lives 5 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. And so my mother had this, a father who was born up there to Spanish and Filipino parents. My nana, who he met, who was running a confectionery shop on Thursday Island, her folks were Sri Lankan and Danish. And so there was no room for prejudice in our house, even though we ended up living in a place called Bloody Belfast when my mum went walkabout. But the smells coming out of our house, Anthony Huckstep in 22 Cliveden Crescent in Belfast, were very different, very different smells coming out of, our neighbours' houses. My mum was a lusty, adventurous cook. When I look back, it was okay, but she loved doing it. And there was six of us, and how she was able to put freshly cooked food on the table every night. Was that a catalyst? Well, it's there. You're the sum of your parts. And, I started cooking at the age of 19. I moved over to Scotland, cooked there for a while, cooked in London for a while, moved back to Scotland and worked in a place that is still there to this day called the Ubiquitous Chip, run by a fellow who was working in the whiskey trade, Ronnie Clydesdale. And so he was always entertaining people in restaurants. And I thought, Jesus, all you get in restaurants in Scotland is deep fried food, and every restaurant serves chips. So he opened his restaurant, called it the Ubiquitous Chip, and still to this day, of course, they don't serve chips. There's no fryer in the kitchen. And he would serve, truckle cheddar from Mull. He would serve, mussels from Loch Fyne. He would serve uig. Uig is the very northern tip of the Isle of Skye. Uig landed, squid, calamari. At a time when people thought, isn't that calamari stuff from Spain? He was, this is early 70s, stating provenance on a menu and being so parochial, having a really narrow focus, charter, DNA for his business. He would remain today, and Ronnie has passed away, a real, ongoing mentor for his philosophies of cooking. I spent time cooking and living in the south of France, in the Languedoc-Roussillon, in a town called Collioure, just outside of Perpignan. That, if I went back to the restaurant today, the menu would be the same. Anthony Huckstep, that whole notion that, of course, we're so used to hearing chefs, the diatribe of chefs, of using food that is sourced locally, of course, nutritionally dense, restoratively grown in a biodynamic, regenerative way, but also then using those locally sourced ingredients and cooking only those dishes from the region. And anything else would be considered anathema. You're in the south of France, you use banyuls, saffron, wild fennel. it's in the north where you use apples and cider and potatoes, and never the twain shall meet. And that's lovely. That's very soulful. But geez, for someone who comes from a country with, a culinary lexicon that's probably no bigger than a pamphlet, you know, I mean, the culinary tradition is rich in Ireland, but it's all about subsistence. There was never a sense of luxury to it. To this day, I mean, Ireland has always subsisted, really, other than those 10 years of the Celtic Tiger. Um, Ireland has never really had extraordinary prosperity. And then I spent time in Italy doing the similar sort of thing. And I did it because I probably had a chip in my shoulder and felt that these were the bastions of cooking. But they're not, they don't hold it's not the preserve of the French or the Italian to good cookery, but it showed me that was the case. What they do is genuinely parochial and seasonal, and they go and shop. They buy their bread twice a day, not twice a week, and that's not to be faddy or trendy or fashion driven. That's just cultural, and that's inspiring.
You've been a part of the Australian food landscape for quite some time. How have you seen Queensland's food landscape change in the last decade or so?
If I was to, look down an imaginary list of our, top 10 restaurants, I heard you talking to Adam from Gerard's and Alana, if you were to look down at Cameron Matthews, who's back, he's up in Noosa, he's going to be doing something very exciting soon, eh? If you were to do an imaginary list of those top 10 restaurants, I would say that almost all 10 of them have no tablecloths. And I think that's a nice, bellwether or harbinger of where we are at. When I came here, you asked me 10 years ago, but when I came here 25 years ago, the restaurants, would have had, double laid tablecloths, Siggy's at the Heritage, they would have been wearing white gloves to serve you your sauce. And, even where I worked when I first came at Baguette, Francis Dominic's, seminal restaurant, Baguette. We were dropping, dishes from, France, onto the menu that it probably that was him, and that the restaurant was the very expression of France, and he was from Perpignan, just outside where I worked. And whenever he interviewed me, Anthony, he never even told me, the bugger. Anyway, he was like a father to me, that man. But there was still that sort of ersatz version of that good food equaled French food kind of thing. But to answer your question, in the last 10 years, I think there's a real sense of, I'm not saying it in a patronising way, but a real maturity in the food conversation in Queensland that there's no point in comparing, which is, I think, us Brisbaneans or Brisbaneites, whatever we're called, are prone to do, comparing Brisbane to Sydney or to Melbourne. It's no more relevant than comparing London to Paris, or Los Angeles to Rome, or New York City to. It's a totally different food conversation here. We are in the subtropics. We are more casual, but all those cooks in that list, that top 10 list, have travelled the world and have been to bigger food centres and have synthesised and distilled everything they have learnt, but have then applied it to where they are in the world. And so you're saying, I'm not in any great rush to say we've got a clearly defined identity, but I think the aspiration, the perspiration should be that when you open a menu, irrespective of what your style of cooking is, whether you're into the rhombuses and parallelograms, is you should know what season it is, and you should know where you are in the world without the menu being overly verbose with stating provenance. You should have a sense of where you are, and I think that's where we're arriving at, and that's a really good thing. It's less about the chef's ego and bombast. That's still important, I think. You still need to have a bit of that. That propels you. But it does seem to be about shining the light on the real stars of the show, and that is the season and the produce available. And that makes sense from, it makes sense for the business's point of view. Because I think, it's interesting. I think when I talk to people, when I do cooking demonstrations or some such, Anthony Huckstep, people are asking me, they don't say, hey, how did you cook that? They say, where did you get that from? There's a real undercurrent of people giving consideration for what they're putting in their body. We're eating out, 11 times a month now instead of 11 times a year. And so, people are much more interested in the nutritional denseness of their food, that they're wanting to know the provenance. I mean, and this is all to varying degrees. There's an anecdotal interest, or there's a neurotic interest. They want to know the bloody macros. They want to know everything. But I think the chefs are responding to that in a way that they're producing this list of the top 10 restaurants are producing food that you can eat 11 times a month. It's not all big night out stuff. And that's a good thing for where we are in the world.
You've had some amazing influences over your career. How much has your own cooking changed?
It continues to evolve and change. I mean, that whole notion of, you rest, you rust. I think I said that earlier. I think, cooking is not this set in stone thing. There is this restless spirit that exists with cooking that, you never stop learning, of course. And I find it's interesting. I did a cooking thing recently out in the Locke Valley, an hour and 15 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. The soil out there is in the top 10 most fertile soil or regions on the planet. And it's an hour and 15 minutes from where we're standing right now. They grow, if you like, generic crops like onions, celery, carrots, beetroot, but in prodigious amounts. And I was doing a dinner out there, and there was, members of government, that sort of thing, and I was cooking for them. But the people I was most anxious or feeling that sort of that friction for nervousness cooking for was the farmers who were in attendance. And it was that sense of duty of obligation not to muck around with their ingredients, and for them to feel that I had done them justice. That was really, really important to me. And so in terms of how we cook now, if I was, we write menus for every single client, and I say to them, what it says it is on the menu is what it is. There's no, just list of 4 words with just staccato punctuation. That there's an explanation of what it is, and that's what it is. We're not trying to befuddle people or mystify them or create, any sort of theatrics with it. But everything is recognizable. So, and you want to do this dance between when Anthony Huckstep comes for dinner, he can see what you've done. He can see the time and the care that you've put into it. But at the same time, Uncle Bob doesn't feel disenfranchised and go, excuse me, dear, what is this? And I think that's an important, that's where cooking should be. I'll tell you something that hasn't happened yet, Anthony Huckstep, if I may. Am I allowed to tell you? It doesn't matter. I got a call the other day from a chef in Brisbane, up-and-coming chef. His name's Philip Johnson from Echo.
It's very up and coming indeed.
Oh God. And so Philip called me and he said, Alastair, I said, Mr. Johnson, he said, I'd like you to cater the Echo Christmas party. And that's it right there. That's it right there, Anthony. I mean, even just me saying that to you now, I'm a 51-year-old man, Anthony Huckstep. I just makes me smile. I feel so terribly, terribly proud. I can remember when I came here, Anthony, Philip's restaurant, as voted by Rick Stein, had won the Remy Martin Gourmet Traveller Restaurant of the Year. I think it was 96. And geez, I couldn't get in for bloody 6 months. And now I have Philip Johnson saying, "Come and cook my Christmas." And I'll tell you something else. So I had Philip out to the house, and Alejandro Cancino, ex-Urbane, and Richard Ousby. I know you know all of these guys, and I had them over for lunch. And because my wife is vegetarian, we don't eat any plants at home. And then on account of Alejandro being vegan, I filled them full of a lot of piss first. But we ate a fully plant-based meal. And, cooks, painters get together and talk about the price of paint. And cooks get together and just talk about food. And, I'll just digress for a second. I can't imagine, Mercedes-Benz calling up BMW saying, "Hey, I've got a problem with my sat nav. Could you tell us what you guys do? Could you give us a wee hand?" They would go, "Get nicked." Cooks get together, and there's that sense of togetherness, of community and sharing. And I realize that's the only company I really feel very comfortable in. And so then to have Philip Johnson say, "One, I want you to do our Christmas party." And he said, "You know what? I want you to make it vegetarian. That's what I want to do. That's how I want my team to eat this Christmas, Alastair. So I'm going next Monday to cook for Philip Johnson and his team, his Echo bistro team." And that could be as good as it gets, Anthony Huckstep.
You mentioned that sense of community and that real connection and sharing that chefs have between each other. How important has that been during this time for the industry?
Can I answer you by saying, just ahead of the pandemic, we were deep in the weeds a little bit before that with the bushfire season, and we did a dinner on the 31st of January at a big venue in Brisbane and the sense of willingness from Dave Sorekis to Will Cowper and Richard Ousby have mentioned, Glenn Barrett, who used to work for David Pugh's now at Wild Canary, and Matt Galinsky. This wonderful sense of a community coming together has been it's been absolutely wonderful. And as we went into something that we never thought we'd ever see ever. I find it really, really. That's the people that have kept, as a community, have, despite the grimness of it, despite the slimness of the return at the best of times, Anthony Huckstep, to see, broadly speaking, this resilience, this sense of tenacity, of a steely optimism is really a galvanizing. And will there be an attrition? Of course, there'll be an attrition, but none of them will, none of them will drop to their knees. That they will go down fighting. And that's very motivating. Is it unique to this industry? I don't know if it's unique to this industry, but I think it is, because it's an industry that's driven by passion. They're passion projects, and they're the people you want to be around. We do a lot of functions for white collar workers, and I would be serving them food. I don't know if I like their conversation as much as the conversations I like when I'm, hanging out at the Noosa Food and Wine Festival. They're my peeps.
This year you've had to adapt and change sort of what you're doing, and a lot of the events that you normally do, particularly weddings, have been postponed. How have you felt this year about your vocation and about, events and that whole industry moving forward?
We have another thing that we have done, Anthony, during this time. If I can go back, when we set up Al'FreshCo, we started off as carnies. We did a market stall in New Farm in Brisbane for 2.5 years, and this is after I got out of restaurants and decided, right, if doing things the same way and expecting the same results. So we decided to do something entirely different. And so we started this market stall. And I can remember when people would see us setting up and they would go, aren't you Alastair? Aren't you that cook of considerable repute? That's probably me saying that. But and but what they were saying, what they weren't saying was, are you a carny? And and there's a dent to the ego there, if you like, for 10 minutes. But if I go back to what I said earlier, it doesn't matter whether excellence exists at every level, and that market for 2.5 years made us really distilled for us what good cooking is and what good cooking isn't. There's no correlation between how tricky something is and how delicious something is. And so we did this market stall for 2.5 years, and we got very close to the earth. And it didn't totally reboot, but it certainly refreshed and gave me clarity about, one, what makes people happy, but also what what people want to eat. We did a 90-second omelette that was never ready in 90 seconds. And we got eggs from the fellow across the way. We got cheese from Camille Morteau up at Gympie. We got tomatoes from Noosa, and we did so. The omelette was an expression, a snapshot, a taste of that market on that day, every single week. And so were all our dishes. And so we did that for a while, and then we got to the point where doing the market and then doing a wedding at night meant every Saturday was a 24-hour day. Every single week, a 24-hour day, once you have a few tumblers of wine when you get home. So we were starting to see cracks there, and so we let it go. But we have been, in the last, since the middle of the pandemic, Anthony Huckstep, we have been doing a market just north of where we live called RECO, REKO, which is it's a new idea to Australia. It's not a new idea. A Scandinavian farmer came up with the idea of providing a conduit, joining the dots between the farmer and the consumer that doesn't involve getting up at 2:30 in the morning and picking your produce, going to the market, setting up your 3 meter by 3 meter tent, standing there all day while people eat your samples, and then packing down and going home. And so the way the RECO is a portmanteau, it's real consumption in Finnish. Just sort of genuine consumption is the sort of the notion, the idea. And people make their acquisitions through a thing called Facebook. I don't know if you've heard of it. And so people could be buying, strawberries from Mandy at Loverberry, or buying, Karen Lindsay's goat's cheese, or Jackie Hinchy's greens. They could be buying meals from me. They could be buying freshly cut flowers grown from seed by Amy. They could be buying gin distilled by John out at Lacey's Creek, who's selling it out at the back of the car. It's like prohibition times. But John's gin, I should tell you this, Anthony. Your listeners will be interested in this. John does a Morton Sunrise gin, an ink gin, which is very much the zeitgeist. And it is, stained with the butterfly pea flower. And that gives it its purple stain. And you go, gosh, am I ever going to remember the name of butterfly pea flower? The botanical name is Clitoria. You'll never forget. Now, where were we? And so people make their purchases for the RECO market, whichever one they want to visit, online through Facebook. So all of the providores have made their sale before they go to the market. Don't you want your farmer to get paid immediately? Just a digression for a second. The average age of a farmer in Australia just over 100 years ago was 21. The average age of a farmer in Australia today is nudging their mid-60s. We need to use it or lose it. The average shopping trolley of 29 items has done 2 Jessica Watson trips. Remember the girl who sailed around the world? 70,000 kilometers, the average shopping trolley to get into your trolley. It's bonkers. It's bonkers. To this day, up to half our fruit and veggies still comes in from offshore when you include tinned products. We've got a ways to go. And the best way to get nutritional food for your family is to be sourced locally. So the RECO market, the farmer gets his money straight away, and then you are advised to turn up to that market between 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock or whatever time it is on that day. And so people flow through the market, Anthony Huckstep, like a drive-through. This wasn't because of the pandemic. This is the way it works. You drive through and you go, hello, oh, hello, Fran, nice to see you. And you pass her wares to her through the window, and they drive down the line. And so it makes it easy for the consumer. It's excellent for the farmer, and the farmer gets his money. It's you can shop without fear of being having the marketeers screaming at you to come over. You can shop online in the comfort of your own home and then go and pick it up. It is ingenious.
That tangent was extraordinary. How do you feel about events moving forward after this year and everything that you do with that connection with food?
In terms of how I see events moving forward, the benefit of being a caterer, I can see it, Anthony Huckstep. I can see the diary. If there's a big AFL game on at the GABA, for example, and you're in a restaurant, you're going to feel it. But I can see what's in my diary. I can see what's coming, and it's looking okay. I mean, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? But it's looking okay. Next year is looking good. We have, as you said, at the top of the show, the borders have opened. We are seeing people can book for functions up to 200 people now. We can see that starting to happen again. The existing weddings that are in the diary are now upon us. So it seems to be returned. I think people, we are creatures of habit, and I think it's such a embedded part of our culture to spend our money the way we do, and I think we're seeing if I can give you a taste of what we're seeing in the immediate future. Normally, during December now, I'm not sure when you're going to broadcast this, but in December, it's pretty damn busy. And then January, well, people normally go away, don't they? They go away to Bali, or they go to Noosa, or they go somewhere. But we can see our diary is looking very strong for January, which is clearly a reflection of the travel restrictions. And so we'll take that. We'll take that, Anthony Huckstep. And, another thing, if our natural sort of model is, 40, 50 weddings a year, we're doing a lot more work at the moment. We're doing a lot more processing because at the moment, the events are much smaller, 40, 50, 70, 80 people. But that's okay. That's okay. We do that. We do home delivered meals. We do the Reco market, and we do it all with the same amount of excellence. And I really don't see any a difference in it. I don't see it's like a different product. It's all what we cook for our business, what I would cook in a cooking demonstration, or what I cook at home. It's all the same. I mean, we're fully immersed in this, and the cooking's the same. This whole notion of going home and eating, a cheese toasty, and we eat the same food that we cook for our guests at home. It's important, especially as with young kids. You got to.
The mellifluous tones of Anthony Huckstep. Nice to talk to you, sir. I am very well.
I'm thinking Anthony Huckstep. It's looking okay, and I say that with a bit of trepidatiousness. It's I mean, I think when you scan the landscape, we've done a good job. But the flights are starting to return to Australia. What impact will that have? We have to keep one eye on that.
How are you going to look back at this time? What sort of positives can you take through from 2020?
We spend a lot of time working, in our business, and probably not enough time on the business. So it really gave us an opportunity to really get clear, and screw things down in every cost center of the business and look at where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are, where our sweet spots are. We're probably still not there yet because part of the that DNA is to wanting to please. So if someone says, "Can you do a function for 20?" we just still say yes because we go, "Oh, they're good people to cook for. Who knows what that will lead to?" And I think that's a good spirit to have. I think that's a good spirit to have. But in broad terms, I think we've got smarter with it. We've got much leaner with it. And that's a good thing as well. Of course, it's a good thing as well. We've learnt to not sweat the small stuff. We've said to ourselves, Anthony Huckstep, are we less happy now that we've got less dough? And these are sort of really revealing, illuminating questions to ask yourselves, and be really honest with yourselves. And we really believe, that we're no less happy. So that must mean that we're not more happy with more dough. Which that makes me smile in the sense that we're doing this for the right reason. We are doing this business,
a catering business,
working in this business together for the right reasons. Because we're all
initially mid sort of May,
and
it was
and you really should be enjoying what you're doing. There's always elements of the daily, weekly grind that you'd like to sort of, the peeling the potatoes. But then Valentino doesn't sew every button on every jacket. It's made us more empathetic. It's given us more gratitude, and it's made us more mindful.
Well, Alastair, it's an absolute joy to catch up with you. I could listen to you all day. You're a bloody legend. We've loved having you on Deep in the Weeds. Good luck over the summer and with all the events and weddings as they start again. Please keep in touch. And we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Anthony. It's perspirational talking to you, but it's been inspirational and aspirational listening to your series. It really has.
Amazing. Keep in touch. This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.